Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. So today I'm very excited to have Andy Dutton with us. He's a vice president of software development at Oracle, and today we've been talking about on our own what we call top career guiding principles. So, what exactly are career guiding principles? Uh, why are they important for at least our careers? How did we develop these, and maybe how they can help you as well? And we're going to go over a few of our actual principles for ourselves and give a couple of examples of how they really kind of helped our careers and how they've guided us in developing our own brands and what we believe we've become known for and valued for in our respective organizations and roles. So with that, I'm going to bring Andy on board. Hey, Andy, it's good to have you today.
Hey Milan, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. So,
Fantastic.
why don't you just give a minute or two and just give the audience just a real brief background of who you are and what your experience is, and just kind of what you do.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Milan. I work for Oracle, obviously, and when I started my career, I was in consulting for about 11 or 12 years, and then I joined a company. I joined BEA Systems in San Jose, and BEA was acquired by Oracle in 2008. And I've been doing software development, either coding myself or architecture work or managing teams that whole time. So currently at Oracle, I'm responsible for the development of our support systems that our customers use.
No, that's great. And so today, though, what we're really excited to talk about is the what are career guiding principles. So, real brief housekeeping for those that are on. If you have questions, please do put them in the chat. We will get to all questions, but please put a Q colon. It helps kind of separate them out. So, Andy, in your mind, what exactly is a career guiding principle?
I think a career guiding principle to me is just a value or a behavior or something that you are trying to live by, work by, I guess, since we're talking about our careers, right? Like what is a guiding principle of something that I hope to live up to when I'm going about my daily business.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think for me, it's very similar. I kind of think of it as the career equivalent to a moral compass, right? Like, what are the things that, at least from a career perspective, that I really feel that I value? Like, what do I act upon? And so the reason they've been important for me because my career guiding principles are really the things that I personally go back to when I have a real question about whether or not I'm doing something right. Like these are things when I get to what ours are, I think it'll become apparent for people that know me that these are things that like are true to the core. And when the going gets tough and I have a real question about what I'm doing, I will go back to my guiding principles to say, am I still following these? Because it can be very easy to kind of be swayed away from certain, you know, ways, like you say, values and things that you deal with in terms of your career. So for me, they've been really critical in kind of grounding me and guiding me back to where I really feel that I want my career momentum to be and what's important to me. So let me ask you real quickly before we get into the specifics of the ones that we use. How did you develop yours? Like, where did they come from?
Great. Thank you, Milan. Great question. I think the first time I really thought about this, I had probably been in like a professional workers for about 8 or 10 years, and I attended a training conference on Stephen Covey and the Seven Habits. And so I went to Arizona and I went up to some ranch somewhere up in the desert, and we spent 2 days kind of going through all the material of Stephen Covey. And so I brought it with me. I got it. Let me see if I can get it on the like.
Yep, it's a very
This is one of
famous
those.
book.
This is one of those books where on the surface you might think it's a self-help, like, oh, those self-help books, what good are they? This particular book, in my opinion, is super, super powerful. And I might, if I get a chance, I'll read a line from it later. So that was the first time where I actually thought about like, oh, what am I trying to be? What is driving me? And so I can talk about that a little bit later too. And then the second time, when BEA had been acquired by Oracle, there was a vice president at the time that I had been a mentor to me, and he actually hosted a session like this where he went through his 6 or 7 guiding principles, and a couple of them really resonated with me, and they're on my list. And I just think like he took the time to share that with people that were willing to show up at his kind of brown bag lunch, whatever. And so since then, if there's people on here that are from my team, they've heard me like pitch these in my own all hands and what have you. So Milan, I think we'll get to them in a moment. So I think just
Yep.
kind of over the course of the last 30 years, there's been a couple inflection points where I've really thought about this.
Yeah, no,
How
that's
about you?
great. And yeah, and for me, what I would tell you is that I have, and what I'll talk about when I have three, and when I get to the three, like one of them started for me way back, like, and it actually is tied to, I would say, one of the moral compass things that I was ingrained in my first military school. And when we get to it, you'll be very clear what the concept is. But it is still defining for me as a not only a moral compass, but also as a career, guiding principle. And so like one of them for me was really defined around that, and that was just something that I was brought up with from a very early age. And then when I think about the second ones, which I'll get to, is that actually came later. And I think when I've talked to a number of people about what are their guiding principles, some people really tie those up in their, what do we say, their personal brand as well, because a lot of these you'll notice will be items that can also tie in your personal brand, but they are important for what people will recognize you for, which is why that consistency is important. So the second one for me was really kind of defined as I developed my working career. I hit a really hard point, and I had to be very reflective about how I work myself out of the point, out of that issue. And when that happened, I realized that became one of my guiding principles was, oh, well, whenever I hit something hard for me, I'm going to go back to this one guiding principle that really kind of defines me. And that's not necessarily an outwardly one, but it's one that I always go back to lean on when I'm hitting a roadblock with my career. And then the last one is really about, also how I operate and kind of what I believe helps me be successful in my career. But that one even came a little bit later, when we'll talk about like what does it mean to advance and how you grow. So for me, really these different, what do we call them? The guiding principles are really things that when people who know me for a period of time, they could probably pick them out just by the way I talk and the things I deal with. And again, I want to say that for most people, everybody's guiding principles are probably a bit different. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. I don't know, Andy. I mean, everybody has different ones. When I've talked to people, it's really about things that you want to define for yourself. So, the examples that we'll talk about may be our own, but I think what we would really kind of stress is what are your your guiding principles for your career. And sometimes, like Andy says, you get great examples from other people, and at other times they just happen to organically grow on their own. So Andy, when you're three, I think you're going to talk about three. You mentioned that one of them at least came from an example. So you want to just give, like, did you develop the other two, or was one of them more organic? Like,
I,
give an
I,
example of one of the other
Milana,
ones would be great.
I'll start with the one that I came up on my own, and then as I think we're going to go back and forth a little bit. So, like I said, I was in consulting, so I was traveling a lot for the first 11 years of my career, and but I was raising a family, and it was really important to me to have quality family time. So I would say I can't state this in a value other than it was really important to me to balance my family with my work. And second, it was really important to me to live in Seattle. I love Seattle. I love the Pacific Northwest. I do not want to move. Right. So I've had people say to me, oh, you should come down and move to Redwood Shores or the Bay Area, but it's just not something that's important to me. So my point here is it's up to all of us to choose how badly we want, the next promotion, or I want to be the CEO, or like what have you. You have to balance that with what else is important to you. And in my case, it was more important to me to be at my son's baseball games or my daughter's ballet concert or what have you than it was to be working 80 hours a week. To other people, it might actually be more important that no matter what it takes, I am going to be in charge like 10 years from now. So anyways, that's my first one, but just kind of a personal, how do I go about working and spending my time?
No, I think that's great. And I think what I love about that one is, there's been a lot of discussion in, in the public today, if you watch TikTok or whatever, about, people who, a lot of people don't believe you can have work life balance and still have a successful career. And I think, having a guiding principle that says that there is a balance, so you don't get overweighted one way or the other, I think is a very healthy thing to go do. Because for me, that also means that you have to develop your own plan for what it means to have that balance as part of your, your principle, as well as understand that at times there's trade-offs. So I think that's an amazing one to have. And so, I applaud you for one, and I hope everybody sees that it doesn't matter which generation you're in. I'm a Gen Xer. We all face the same challenges when you're trying to grow your career, you're coming out of college, and how do I have work-life balance? And I think that's something that, it's very easy to fixate on one side or the other. And so again, I think that's a great one. And so thanks for sharing that one. And I'll share my first one. And for me, this one actually started when in my first military school. The actual school, cadet motto was duty, honor, and integrity, right? So integrity above all has always been one of my guiding career principles as well. Many times in people's careers, you get placed in an uncomfortable situation about what it means to do the right thing, and the right thing isn't always the most easy thing to do. And the one thing, there's a great saying out there that says, your integrity is one thing that nobody can take from you. You can only give it away, right? So for me, as hard as it's been in a few times of my career, I've always gone back, and I even try to associate my personal brand is like, my integrity cannot be compromised, because of my work. And at times, I know what people would say is there's some really hard decisions. You have the most uncomfortable position. It'd be easy to take the easy road and go along with the crowd, or should you speak up? And so for me, my first one comes back from that first military school where it was really, integrity was really who you were. And once you kind of lose that, it becomes really hard to get that back in other people's eyes. So for me, that's like the first one that was developed, that was really developed through military school when I was in military high school many years ago. So yeah, I think it's great, to have these types of experiences that really kind of define who you are as a person, that other people will hopefully also see as well. So
Yeah,
thanks
and
for
Milan,
sharing that.
I can attest based on it. We've had many conversations, and just based on I've heard you describe to me how many times you've had to present to senior executives and how important it's been to you to really tell it straight, so to speak, and not sugarcoat what's going on. And so I think that just reinforce like what you're saying about integrity. I think like I've seen you like living that like day to day, which is great.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will say that again, I think for me, what that also means is I had to develop other skills on how to do that in a way that's accepting of other peers and other people, right? Like you can't be a jerk about it and just say it. Like you have to have the right skills to present the information in a constructive way and still hold true to, for me, that core principle. So yeah, I'd love to kind of let's talk about your second one then. I think I'd love to hear the next
Okay.
one.
Okay, I'm going to show another. I have more materials to share. So this little piece of paper I carry around in my briefcase. It's got my three values traits I try to practice. So I'll hit the first one. So the first one is what I call believe in the best, and that's a funny little phrase. But what is believe in? I'll give an anecdote and then I'll describe. So what believe in the best to me means is if I'm working with someone, I am always going to assume that we have shared interest and we're both trying to achieve a positive outcome. Which sometimes people have ulterior motives, and that can come back to bite you. But I just try not to worry about that. So I was working at BEA. I was on the CIO staff, and we had an offsite in Denver, and I was responsible for a certain set of stuff. And another person on the team started making all these comments about my area, which I took to be very negative comments. And so I remember flying home back from Denver to Seattle, and I thought to myself, I think I mistook this person's criticism for this person actually trying to contribute and make it more make a better outcome. So I actually called him the next day and I told him exactly that. And it was a really powerful moment for me. And for we have just a phenomenal working relationship ever since. We talk from time to time. He's since left Oracle, so but we don't work together like that. But it was just so I really try to assume and work positively with all people. Now, I'm in a very stressful project at the moment. If there's people from my team that are on the call, they know this. And so I have actually taken a little piece of paper that says positive on it, and I've taped it down on my computer because I find myself violating my own principle, which really bothers me. And I really want to make a positive work environment where we're all kind of in it together and trying to achieve shared outcomes.
No, I think that's great. That's one that I also know I need to continuously work on as well as my frustration level goes up. So that's I think this is a good point to say. Okay, so when you how do you deal when you recognize when you're not actually meeting or following one of these? Like, how do you personally deal with that? Like, how do you recognize you're not following it, and what do you do to course correct?
I think I think like I have found I try never to well I shouldn't say that. I try very hard not to use inappropriate language. I try not to get worked up, and yet I have found myself doing it. So like I said, I posted this little thing on my computer, or I have told myself on a Monday morning 8 a.m. Andy, your goal is not to curse once this entire week, right? That's like that. It's that silly, right? But that's what it comes down to. Or I've entered like I have a meeting that's always stressful every single week, and now I try to enter that meeting and say I am going to be a positive person in this meeting. So just like I don't always succeed, but it helps me. Just like some self awareness has helped me, I think.
No, no, I think that's great because I think, like for me, when I get in those situations, I do the same thing. I have to think about like what's the reminder, right? Like what's the thing that's going to give me that shot in the arm that says, "Hey, remember this." And I think at this point of my career, I can't resist this because, as like we've talked about, for me, winter is coming in terms of, the season of my career. So what I think is important that as we recognize what these are, and they will change over time, because I do know for me, my principles have actually switched a little bit, and I'd say they've grown and they've modified as I've kind of gone through my career. So thanks for sharing that. I think it's great. So I'll go ahead and share my second one, which is really as much of a statement as it is of a principle. And for me, my second one is I am not a victim ever, right? So when I developed this principle, I would mention that I had a dark time in my life, and it was career related. I felt I was stuck, I wasn't going anywhere, and so I just told myself is really I'm in charge of my career, and I can't be a victim in this, which really kind of forces me every time I have a dilemma is to figure out my path. Right? It's like a forcing function that I'm not at the how do I put it, the mercy of anybody else, whether it's the situation, my manager, the project. And so it really kind of reinforces in my own head that I can't play a victim in anything that I do. I have the ability to manage my own destiny, take my own actions. And if it doesn't work, I can take a different action and try to readjust it. And so that one actually is one that kind of awoken in me when I was facing my first, I would say, glass ceiling in my last company, where I really had to go through and think very critically on myself is, am I doing everything I need to do, whether that was getting coaches and mentors, having a good conversation with my manager, getting the right, let's say, job that actually had the scope and the work that I wanted to do, or even talk to my manager about increasing my scope so I could then grow my career. So I think for me, my second one was really about really taking ownership and coming up with my own little statement that says, look, in the end, it's all back on the only thing that I can impact, which is my own decision making and my own actions. So for me, that one's been
Totally.
very impactful for me as my second one.
That's an awesome one. I totally agree. Which leads me, Milan. I'm gonna read from the book because
Sure.
you hit on something. So in chapter one, which is called "Be Proactive," it's about everything you just described, which is you control your own actions, not other people. And so there's a really powerful passage about a person that had been in the concentration camps and refused to let it define who he was. And he has this principle: between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose, right? Which is really saying whatever outside forces are acting upon you, it is up to you and you alone to decide how you are going to respond. Right. And so I think you've said that, right? You didn't know how to deal with it, but you knew it was up to you. And so only you can decide what the outcome is going to be. So that's a really great guiding principle, I think.
Yeah, thanks. That one's been pretty key for me, particularly in the second half of my career. When I reflect back, I think, hope is a very dangerous word in my vocabulary, right? Because hope doesn't have a timeline or a goal associated with it. And I
Yeah.
think the early part of my career, I made this bad assumption that if I did all the right things, then the right things would happen. And there was this level of hope in between there where I didn't define all these things that we talk about today in terms of a path or working with your manager or having a defined goal with your manager or setting a timeline or even talking about the expectations. So yeah, I really love that passage. And I think there's lots of good, anecdotes that go with that in many different books and things that I've read. So yeah, that's been my second one. So let's hear your next one. I think would be great.
Okay. My next one is same piece of paper. Exert personal influence, not positional influence.
That's a
And
good
what
one.
I mean by this is you do not need to be an executive vice president to influence another group of people or another individual on what you think is the right thing to do, or just what is the outcome. And so I actually have a personal anecdote on this. When I joined Oracle, I was asked to run a team, which I did, and we were on an important project. We were trying to move all of Oracle's support systems onto what is now My Oracle Support, and there was a team of people that were doing performance testing. So they were load testing the system and trying to ensure that we could handle production scale. And I had no responsibility there whatsoever, but I had experience doing it. So I actually just started kind of involving myself with the work they were doing. And even though the team didn't report to me, but I got involved. I helped. I spent many, many hours with the team. I still know a couple of the people on the team who are just fantastic individuals. And so it didn't matter to me that I didn't own the team. I just felt like I can make a difference here and it's valuable to the project team and to the company. And so I'm going to do it. And interestingly enough, when we finished the project and we went through an organization change and whatnot, I was given more responsibility, and
Yeah.
my manager at the time said, "Well, such and such person, SVP, he put in a really good word for you because of all the work you did on this." And so I think just give where you can give and make a difference. I think generally speaking, it's going to come back to help you. And so the bottom line is, to come back to my value statement, you can influence other people regardless of your title, right?
Yeah.
If you have a good argument to make and you're doing good work, use that to try to affect the outcome of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, totally. I think that's great. And I totally, there's so many conversations you can have about what it means to go work on those kinds of projects and how that builds positively your network. And so that one, I feel that like I actually believe that one. It's maybe not one that I call out as a career guiding principle, but it's definitely one that has a lot of. We should probably even do another session on that about what it means to do that kind of work and get that kind of support when you don't know that it could even come back to you, but it usually does in a very positive way. So I'd like to just take a quick second, and I know we got quite a few people on. If you feel comfortable, I'd love it if you could share some of your own, what you would call your career guiding principles in the chat for others to see. Because, part of this is to share the experiences of others. And while, Andy and I could probably talk all day on ours, it's really not as interesting to us because we want to learn from other people's guiding principles as well. Like I know Andy and I both have one-on-one conversations with people, but we really do want this to become more interactive and say, hey, like let's share ideas and share something that you do that maybe is one of your core guiding principles, or if you don't even think it is, it's just something that you live by in terms of your career. Love to hear it. So please do feel free to share it for others as well. I know myself and Andy, I'm sure other people would like to see it also. And so I'm going to use your last one to kind of segue into my third one, actually. And this is one that that frankly was developed in my military days after college. And when I realized that, and again, I was a Gen Xer. We're brought up, I have an Indian father. And so those that don't know, people who have Indian fathers, they have kids for three reasons, BS, MS, PhD, engineering, law student, or medical field. Like that's what they raised us really with the expectation of. But with that came what I believe was one of Abraham Lincoln's, statements that I really liked, and I will give his statement, and then it's paraphrased more recently into a shorter version. But Abraham Lincoln said, "I'm a great believer in luck, and I find that the harder I work, the more I have of it." And the new way they usually say it is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that is really my third guiding principle is, if I work hard, good things tend to happen. And, that's a pretty ambiguous bar, to be clear. But I find that it's been true for my whole career that the harder I work, and it doesn't mean work more, it means work harder and obviously work smarter. And there's lots of things we talk about, different parts of this channel about that. But it's really that you do, like for me, working hard has always equated to success of some kind. So I always keep that back in mind when I'm starting to feel a little lazy or I'm coasting. I have to go back to that third one for me, which is the harder I work, the luckier I seem to get. So to me, it's always been kind of a pretty equitable mapping between the two. And again, there's lots of ways you want to work smarter, not necessarily harder. But the saying is what stuck with me when I used to have to read a lot of history when I was in military school. So again, that's been my third one, Andy. And I found for me, that one's been like the third one that kind of rounded out the effort based aspect of my guiding principles.
That one's great. What interests me about that is I have heard that when I first heard that anecdote, it was supposedly said by J.P. Morgan. So I find it
Yes.
interesting that you got Abraham Lincoln saying it. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there was somebody else too, and just the shorter version, right? Because it kind of rolls off the tongue a little easier than Abraham Lincoln's statement. But yeah, that one that really kind of stuck with me over the years. So it's been a
I
good
think
one for me.
that's a really good one. So interesting. Great.
So Andy, did you have? I think you had a third one on your list, right?
I actually I had a third one on my list, but I'm gonna skip it. I'm gonna go back to some of the ones we've already been talking about, Milan, and just apply it to some of the behavior that I see myself practicing and others practicing that might, but what I wouldn't call it negative. But how many times have we been in a discussion and we'll say something like, "Well, we need to put that together because EVP blah wants to see it," right? As an example. And I every now and then, if I'm on my game, I find myself challenging myself or the team and saying, "Well, we need to put that together because we need to see it," right?
Right.
And so I think it's really it's a powerful reinforcement of I'm doing some project or piece of work. Yes, I'm being told to do it. I'm not saying I'm not. You're right. We're being told to do it or we're being asked to do it or what have you. But there are things we should be doing in our work that will make the outcome more positive or will help us see issues or what have you. We don't need to be presenting to senior executives for us to say, "Oh, I better go do this and understand this better so that I really know what I'm getting into." So anyways, that's kind of ties back to being proactive and just like do things because you know they need to be done, not because you're waiting for someone to look for it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally like the right way to think about it. And so, what I would be curious about is, okay, so so we've talked about like creating these are what they are for us. How do you feel these have actually helped you in your career though, having these principles? Do you feel they've been like a direct impact to you? Have you personally used them as part of your brand? And how do you articulate that? So I think now I'd like to spend a few minutes on how do you actually use these as part of your career to advance your goals?
I think that's a great question, Milan. I think the very first one I described at the beginning about my work life balance that has absolutely been a personal choice that I go to sleep every night not worrying about having made and being willing to have a work balance that's comfortable for me or that I want, right? So could I be more senior, make more money? Maybe. I don't know. Like if I'd have worked more than I did, sure. And I think I work pretty hard, by the way. But I'm not on the road 5 days a week. So I think that one I'm happy. I think the other ones I talked about. I think um, if I have a personal brand, I think if I do, it is I want I want work to be a fulfilling and enjoyable environment. And I try to do that by valuing everybody's input and trying to foster teamwork. And I think, yeah. So I think just tie that back. I guess I hope let me say this. I I hope I'm living up to my own values, and like people that work with me would say the same thing. They might say, "Oh, Andy's full of it," like but I don't think they would.
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
so.
They can put if they're here, they can comment. Anyways,
You think they're
I
going to
don't know if I
comment
gave
openly, Andy? Come on now.
right. So anyway, Milan, how about you?
Yeah, no, thanks. So I do. So for me, I think at certain points in my career, my guiding principles have really helped unstick me in terms of my career because these are the ones for me that help me be very introspective and brutally honest with myself on am I really doing everything that I feel I should be doing? And so for me, they're almost like, we talk about having an accountability buddy, right? Like who's the person who's holding you accountable that you're kind of working with? And for me, I've found that these kind of help me be accountable to myself because if I really am introspective and I really am thinking critically about myself, these principles they kind of organically grown, but what they do is they make me really have that hard conversation with myself saying, am I really doing the things I should be doing for me? And I'm not just like getting swept up with the current, right? Without having a direction or the ability to change my direction. So again, from a career perspective, I found that these have really helped and stick me in very specific points where, yeah, I hit a low point or I hit a snag and I go back and I kind of walk through these and I say, okay, am I really doing everything? Am I really working hard enough? Have I really kind of, come up with the I'm not a victim attitude, or am I kind of playing the victim here for myself? And I need to get help. It doesn't mean I'm going to solve it myself. It just means what's the first thing to fix a problem? You have to recognize you have a problem. And I think for me, it's kind of helped me get into that mode of recognizing when, from a career perspective, since we're talking about that, do I feel stuck? And I think what I would also say is things go in ebbs and flows, right? Like you say, sometimes life gets in the way. So don't beat yourself up. COVID put a thing on everybody, right? Like nobody knew how to deal with COVID. And what does that mean for our careers? And we're working remotely. We don't have FaceTime in the office. What are the new tools we have to deal with and using Zoom and all this other kind of stuff? So, on a full-time basis. So what I would say is these have just been like a good, guiding direction that have really kind of helped me. And I can tell you specifically unstick a couple things in my career. Like the one example I would give is I took a job years ago, many years ago. It was considered a bad job, but the reason I took it is because when I looked at the fact my career wasn't moving, the two prior people in that position broke that first glass ceiling in my last company. So I said, okay, I didn't really want to do that job, but if was I doing everything I could do at the time to get what I wanted as part of my career? And I said, I wasn't unless I took this job because there was a good history there. So for me, it really kind of helped guide me to a decision that I may not have made if I didn't have my own guiding principles holding me accountable. So again, I think for everyone, you have to kind of figure out what that is. But I have found that people I've talked to, most of them who really feel good in their career, and good doesn't mean promoted, and good doesn't mean, that you're making a ton of money. Good means that you're happy with your career, the direction
Yeah.
it's going, the value you're providing, and just your general, work life balance and everything else. There's many different definitions for that, but the ones that everybody who felt good about it, they have had a set of principles. Like yours was much about work life balance was a big part of that, and you're still successful. So I would say that the people who are happiest with their career and do tend to get what they want is because they think about it in a certain way. So I don't know, Andy, if you felt or talked to people who have had the same kind of feeling on that, but that's been one that I've seen with a number of people
That's
I've talked
great.
to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I found myself there's mornings when I wake up and I say to myself, today I need to take action. Right? We have this problem, and today I'm going to take action. I have one of my favorite all-time people at Oracle. She has since left. She used to say to me, "I'm in the business of getting stuff done," and I think that's like a really powerful. It's a powerful force to say, "I'm not going to wallow in infinite analysis. I am going to like start moving forward in one way or another." Which so, anyways, I just that's like a fourth one I just
No,
added.
that's great. And so, hey, we have a great question. I'm going to pop it up here. Thanks, Ahmadin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So here's a great question. So, how do you know your guiding principles are actually working for you? So, Andy, why don't you start with that, and then I'll pick up for me.
Wow. Ahmed and I have worked together for a very long time. We have worked together since 2008. He's an awesome, awesome engineer and architect. So, anyways, Ahmed, thanks for the question. How do you know? I, uh, I, I, I think you just know. I don't know how to answer that. I would say if you have a personal belief system and you can go to bed at night and feel good about yourself, then I would argue your guiding principles are working for you. I think Milan, you just made this point a couple of minutes ago. Your success as a professional, you define the success. Now, other people don't define it. So, Ahmed, if you've got I know, and by the way, I know Ahmed has very important belief system. So, like for him, I can imagine what it would be. But I think you have to feel confident that you're living the work life you want to live, yeah. And you feel that happening because of your principles. That's my answer.
No,
Go
that's
ahead,
great,
Milan.
and I totally agree with that. I'll just maybe add my own little lens to that. And I think, Ahmed, I would say that for me, I at different points in my career, and this is when I talk about seasons of a career, right? Like when you're out of college, what's important to you is different than when, I call that spring, right? Or out of school, out of college, your first job. What's important to you at that stage of life is different than if you're in your summer or fall or winter, because you might have a family later, so certain other things kind of change in priority. And so, as Andy says, defining what's important for you at that stage of your career, and then do you feel good about that? Like what are your goals? Are you meeting them? Do you feel like you're growing? And I think I know, like Andy, if because I tend to set personal goals for things and then I measure against that. And if my principles guide me towards that, then I know it's working. And then as Andy says, it's an art and a science. Like, do you feel comfortable in your career in terms of growth, in terms of scope, in terms of learning? And if you set goals for that and your principles guide you towards those goals, I think you kind of know if they're working. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I'm an old military guy. So my gut is my gut still comes into play. Like I know in my gut when I'm not feeling good about something, I need to go assess it. I may not know exactly what's causing that feeling in my gut, but I know something's not working, and that's when I usually go back to my principles. And if they help me relieve that sense of urgency in my gut that something's not working, then I know it's working. But if I can't resolve it, then either my principles aren't working and I have to figure out what else it is, or it's in conflict with my principles. So I have to go back to the principles in order to get that gut feeling to change or accept the fact that my gut's not going to feel good about it, but my principles are working. Right. So again, it's like, how do you measure it against that? And then for me, it depends on what stage of the career that I'm in and which goals I set. But again, great question. Any rebuttal on that one?
From me? No,
Yeah.
no. I really liked your point about the gut feel, and maybe that's what I was saying when I put my head down on my pillow, right? Like, did you just can you sleep with yourself, right? I think that's an important question. So
Exactly,
that's great.
exactly. No, so that's a great question. Thank you. So, again, if anybody else has any questions, we'd love to hear them. Andy and I'm sure we could talk for another 20 minutes very easily on this. But what I would say is that I'll start. We'll kind of start a wrap up unless questions come in. So, what I would say is I think the important thing that I know Andy and I talked about, at least kind of portraying, is that for us, having your own career guiding principles, we think is a good thing. What they mean for each individual is different. And I would also say that I've learned through my career that what's important in terms of how you apply those principles will change based on what your goals are for that stage of your career, because they'll apply differently. And I really do, like, this is one thing that I didn't even realize till, as I said, for me, I didn't realize it until I got closer to the winter here of my career, is that it really has changed. Like, how, like, my principles are still my principles, but what they mean in terms of application has changed through the course of my career. And it was not until I really recognized that did I realize that that uncomfortable feeling of them changing in terms of goals is actually okay. Because for a while I kind of felt like my goals aren't working, or my principles aren't working. But then I realized that my goals are what had to change, not the principles. So for me, I would just like people to think about, if you don't have guiding principles, I'm sure you actually do, but I know with people I've talked with and worked with before, they haven't really like formalized them to some degree, so they recognize them as a principle that they can apply to much more than just a point in time part of their career. So for me, that's something I hope people can take away, is that everybody has them. How you define them is one thing, and the definition of how to apply them changes at different points of your career stage. So Andy, I guess what we'll probably do is start the wrap up. So Andy, any final words or things you'd like people to take away?
Um, I think you did such a good job summarizing. I don't know if I have anything to add. I think I don't. By the way, I'll add one thing. I don't think it hurts to actually write them down, right?
That's a good point.
And just ruminate on them for a while, and you know, I don't be afraid to share them. I think that's another one. I put them in my all hands, and I don't do it very often because people are probably sick of hearing them. But I think it's a valuable tool to why not share them, right? I think it's worth it. One, write them down. Two, look for opportunities to share, maybe at lunch, maybe in a meeting, maybe in an all hands, what have you.
No, I agree, and I think Ahmed also made a good point, and I think I touched upon it a little bit earlier in my portion. But the guiding principles is definitely broader, right? Remember, guiding principles, something that guides you throughout your life, of which, for me, like I said, I talked about the difference between a moral compass and a guiding principle. But for me, you're right. Like, these are things I try to live my whole life with. But in this conversation, we're kind of focusing them on the career aspect of it. But you're absolutely right, Ahmed, and I agree with you. Like, these are principles that I try to associate outside of work as well as in work. So again, great point, Ahmed, and really appreciate the comment and the question. I think that's great. So with that, what I would ask people is, look, Andy and I have a network of a lot of senior people, and a lot of them actually would love to participate and have discussions that are meaningful to people that really, like, I can tell you, I never had access to senior people when I was kind of coming up very much. I had a few, but I really wish I had more people like Andy who are willing to come out of their comfort zone and actually share their experiences in a broader forum. But if you have certain topics or things you'd really like to hear about, please do put them in the comments, or you can send me an email, or for those that work on our teams, to send us an email, and we're happy to kind of pull together the right people and topics if people have things that they would really like to hear about. So we really hope that this session has given you at least one thing to think about as you think about your career. And again, we're happy to answer questions as well. If something hits you after the fact, please do put it down in the comments, and I'll make sure Andy and I kind of respectively look at it and then give you an answer back as well. So with that, I will go ahead and call this a session, and thank you everybody for joining. And for those that might have joined late, the rerun will post as well. But again, thank you all. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. We'll see you, Andy. Thanks. And thank you,
Thank
everybody
you.
else.
Yep. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.